Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the July Schools Forum. I am Alison Coleman. I am Chair of Forum. Other people present today are Amanda Havers, Colin Shaw, Daniel Jones, Councillor Debbie Richards, Emma White, Gemma Morgan, Gordon Jones, Jacqueline Dyer, Julia Granger, Mike Quinton, Rowena Mackey, Robert Lenko, Sonia Harben and Teresa Spilling. So welcome everybody. We have had apologies today from Angela Ransby, Andrew Berry, Angela Goducci, Darren Woodward, Mike McKeveny, Ruth Coleman, Sarah Jane Smedmore and Maria Kemble. Just as a reminder about the process for the meeting, if you wish to make a point, then please feel free to put any comments in the chat. But if you would like to make a point or ask a question of any of our presenters, then when you do, it'd be really helpful if you could put your camera on and tell everybody who you are and where you're from. Thank you. So turning now to the minutes of our last meeting, paper A. Our meeting was on the 8th of May. If I could please take the minutes page by page for accuracy and matters arising, please. If there's anything you wish to flag, then please call out. So we have page 1 and 2, 3 and 4. There were not any actions on the last minute, so there's nothing there to follow up. And nobody has flagged anything with me, so we'll take it as that they are an accurate record of our last meeting. Thank you very much. So we can now move on to our next item, which is paper B, the DSG spend for 2024-25. I'll hand over to Sonia. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Good morning, everybody. I think you might all know me by now, but I'm Sonia Harben. I'm the CRP Strategic Finance Lead. So this is just a full report detailing the overspend as I shared verbally at the forum in May. The position hasn't changed. There were no significant or any changes we had to make from where we were at that point. So just to recap, the overall DSG budgets were overspent by 47 million. Broken down to a 48.2 million overspend against Heine's block and an underspend against the schools block of 1.3 million. And that underspend against the school block was, there was less budgeted for growth of about 0.9 million, which, as we discussed last time, is an emerging issue, especially at the moment in primary pupils. And the balance of the difference in the schools block was where the cost of rates were less than had been expected in year. So that will all be moved back to the schools block reserve position. The Heine's block overspend of the 48 million, that was offset by the schools block transfer that's been agreed at the 0.5%. So that was about 2.7 million. And it means the current Heine's block deficit stands at just over 101 million. And just as we spoke before, that is a debt that's cost would need to be funded through core funding if we didn't have any other capital reserve monies to offset that deficit at the moment. Schools block underspend will be moved into the DSG reserves, and then we will agree how that can be used by Schools Forum, probably in the October forum. And as part of the 24-25 accounts, and we say this every year, we have to sort of make an assumption of what early years DSG will be recouped based on actual numbers on the census count in January. So that adjustment at the moment is about 0.8 million. So if the adjustment is more or less than that, we'll be in a position to distribute back to providers in year. And again, we'll look at that in October. And it should be noted that the overspend in this report forecast by inclusion of close to 63 million for this coming year is a very early indicative figure, just based on known commitments and an expectation of growth in demand. And we know that's not met by the increase in grant income. And we know that the statutory override has been extended for a further 2 years. And as I said before, it's obviously not a permanent, sustainable solution to what is a national problem. and then we're just awaiting the white paper, which I think is due in autumn. Well, it is due in autumn now, and see how that will help or support the challenges that we face, not just in Suffolk but nationally with our budgets, really. So I don't know if there's any questions anybody's got on the report. Happy to take those.
I haven't seen any hands go. Gordon. Morning, Gordon. Welcome.
Good morning. I was going to wait until the high needs one for my question, but as Sonia, it's Gordon Jones, and I'm a trustee at Unity School Partnership. But as Sonia has raised the high needs deficit, I mean, the deficit on the balance sheet at March 2025 is 97.6 million, and it's now agreed to allow this dodgy practice to March 28.
Yeah.
Then the deficit is projected to be 3 times greater at 293.8 million. Will this extension have a negative impact on the residents of Suffolk, and especially those families with children with special education needs? And if not, how come?
The simple answer to that is yes. There's obviously a financial impact to councils' funding and how we have to allocate our budgets, because we will need to be in a position to fund that deficit. You're absolutely right. I can't speak on behalf of the council about how that will be managed in future years. I think we've got a long way to go, and I think we need to. I know that Mike attended a webinar yesterday with, I don't know if it was the DfE, but I can see Mike's got his hand up to come in. It's kicked the problem down the road, which isn't helpful. I think I would, and I haven't had an opportunity yet to discuss any detail with Lou, our Section 151 officer. But what I will do, Gordon, is I will, when Lou's back from leave, I'll have a chat and I can come up with a written response to you about how, and discuss with Andrew. I don't know whether Debbie wants to come in, Councillor Richards, about how we will manage that.
Before you open it up, I'm not. I know the question is directed to you, Sonia, and I think we're probably both on the same page as with regard to our concerns for the problem, but just trying to hide it off balance sheet, I don't actually think is the way to go. I know that's how you've been directed to deal with the problem at the moment, but it's nowhere near an answer. And I think with all the things which have been happening in the last few days, I'm not quite sure where the funding for the projected national deficit of about 5 billion will be found. But
yeah.
Thank you very much, Gordon. I'll come to Mike, and then Councillor Richards has got her hand up, so I'll come to Debbie after that. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, as Sonia said, I did attend a DfE briefing yesterday with some senior DfE policy makers, and they tend to be fairly vague when we ask questions around what's happening with the statutory override, because it has been extended by 2 years. I think there will be some sort of transitional arrangements. So at the end of 31st of March 2028, it's not going to be a case that it ends and all of a sudden councils have to take on this massive deficit onto their balance sheet, because that just wouldn't be the right thing to do. And I think they were keen to sort of reiterate that. Obviously, with local government reorganisation as well, you don't want to have these new entities that are coming into place on the 1st of April 28 and having these massive deficits as well, and being bankrupt in effect. And I think that was something else that other local authorities were mentioning yesterday. So I think at the moment we're just waiting for the white paper on what that looks like. I think again the key message was around inclusion. So one of the senior DfE policymakers yesterday was saying that he thinks that local authorities have set up too much new specialist provision, and he was saying can you believe it? And he was saying that he wants to get everything back into mainstream settings. He did sort of infer to a new grant, like a pupil premium grant, but for inclusion. So schools would then be responsible for actually stating what they're spending that funding on, like pupil premium. So there may be something like that. But again, where is this money coming from? We don't know. We know that the settlement over the next few years has been announced. I think an overall about 4.2 billion increase in schools funding until 2028. But you need to put a caveat on that with some of the grants for the teacher pay, support pay, all of that. So I think hopefully in October we can provide a better update on where we're going and where we're going with the statutory override and what it looks like for the deficits for local authorities. But at the moment we're just sort of we don't know. And but I just thought I'd give you an update and say we'll just keep you updated.
And free school meals and extra breakfast clubs are all coming out of that pot as well. So yes, when I looked at the spending review table for education, there's not enough money to cover the current deficit, let alone the new programmes. That is the problem, isn't it? Sorry, Councillor Richards, I've gone off on my own tangent. I'll come to you now.
Right, so from what I've heard, the plan is to actually change the way we do it with children who need EHCPs and not have EHCPs, so that the idea is that in the future, as Michael mentioned, children will be looked after in their own schools rather than, except for people with profound needs who will be put into specialist educational settings. So the government is trying to help the future, but as we are now, there is no simple answer. And when I asked Richard Smith, would we pay off the DSG deficit if we could, his answer was no. So there we go. There is no simple answer to this. I'm very sorry.
Gemma, you're next, and then I'll bring Gordon back in.
Hello, everybody. So I'm the head of SEND Funding and Provider Services, Gemma Morgan, for those of you who don't know me. Sorry, I need to come in on this, and it's going to cover some of the stuff that's on my agenda item as well, Alison, and some of what I was going to say, I'm going to say now. So we are expecting a white paper. It's been pushed back to the autumn term. And as Councillor Richards said, that we expect in there to be some quite fundamental reforms to the SEND system to be part of that paper. We know they are looking at the future of EHCPs and looking at the future of how specialist provision is delivered. There is a mix. I was going to talk about the fact that we are trying to develop more specialist places because our mainstream schools we talk to our specialist providers. Our mainstream schools don't have the resource or the funding to be able to offer enough support for children with SEND in mainstream schools at the moment. If Michael's mentioned a premium that may be coming through that might help with that. So what we're doing is we're putting in place some additional places which are within a mainstream school site, but they are classed as specialists. So we call them specialist units. So the children have access to mainstream school, but then they have the unit to go to when they need that more specialist intervention. So we are putting in more places within the local offer. It's not enough to cover the demand. It's not enough to cover the number of children who we've got out of county, but it is helping particularly with those who are coming through the system. So there is a lot going on, and I completely take Gordon's point. We all agree with the situation is appalling. Our funding is so poor. We aren't funded in relation to the number of children we've got with SEND in Suffolk, the number of children with EHCPs. The funding formula isn't accurate. It's not fair. For years we've been funded less than our other local authorities who have a similar makeup as us. So this is stuff Sonia's told you all before, I know that, but I just think the problem is, and again repeating what Sonia said, we're at an early forecasting stage. We've seen unexpected growth since the pandemic. If you look at our trajectory modelling, if we look at the last 4 years, we're looking at 120% increase in SEND provision. Well, we can't keep projecting that forward. Somewhere It's got to change and it's got to stop. And I'm hoping that the SEND reforms and the white paper will at least be the starting point. Don't get me wrong, that will take years, I know that, but it will be a starting point for where we're moving forward and how these things are going to start improving.
Thank you, Gemma. Gordon, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. In my initial introduction, I mean, I didn't mention that as the trustee at Unity, I have a responsibility for SEND. Unity as a trust probably has more specialist units than any other sort of trust, and we have a number of special schools, and expecting some of those pupils in the special schools to go into the specialist units with their really particular needs, I think quite honestly is in cloud cuckoo land. Yes, it needs the whole SEND provision needs looking at. The demand, as we know, has gone up since the 2014 Act, when education healthcare plans came in. I don't hold out a lot of hope that the white paper will address many of the issues which we have, and I'd be highly surprised if there's adequate funding which comes out of it. I don't hold out much hope, and actually I'm not so sure that Lou Ainslie either does, bearing in mind her note of 624 in the draft financial statements to March 25. I mean, it's we are not addressing the problems which are facing us, in my view.
Thank you, Gordon. Gemma, back to you.
Thank you. I think the points that Gordon's made are completely right. I think the one white paper is not going to make all of the difference. It will be a start, and like you say, the money is still going to be an issue. The point I just wanted to pick up on, Alison, was that we completely, I mean, as a local authority, we would never move children inappropriately out of one setting to another. We absolutely accept that there'll always be a demand and a need for special schools, for units, for mainstream settings. We will always have a reliance on the independent sector as well, because those schools do work really hard with those children who have the most complex needs, and for those who don't necessarily have we don't have the provision locally for them. So I think it's about making sure that the right children are in the right settings, but also so that our mainstream schools are empowered to offer as much as they can to the children who need it.
Okay, thank you, Gemma.
Thank you.
Robert, I'll take your point, and then we can pick some other points up about SEND when we get to Gemma's actual paper or her.
Thank you very much. It's just a brief point. I'm Robert Lenko from Thurston Community College. Morning, everybody. Michael just briefly mentioned local government reorganisation, which is going to come upon us quite soon with mayoral elections. I just wonder, have we any idea how that's going to affect the education departments if we join up with Norfolk? Has anybody got any plans or ideas of where we're going to end up with that? I don't know who could answer that, but it's going to be upon us.
Yeah, I'll come in on that. I mean, we're still obviously in very early days. We don't know where we'll be in terms of how many unitaries are Suffolk. I think the devolution, it shouldn't necessarily impact on our what I'd call the education DSG budget. That's, so I'm really hoping that will, I think, form more part of LGR, which is sort of, the theory is that comes in 3 years. I think what I wanted to say about LGR really is, and Mike touched on it, that's going to have how we manage that if we move into 2 unitaries, and I my mind is blown. It's difficult enough at the moment having to look at, so we're already doing work for business cases, as you can imagine, looking at how it would look over 1, 2 or 3 different unitaries, which have all been sort of put forward via via the districts and ourselves. So we're doing all that modelling work with Grant Thornton, who is supporting us with that work. We haven't looked at the education side yet, to be fair, Robert. We're looking at more just the core budgets, because the education funding is mainly a grant, you'd hope that just follows where the children are. It's not quite as simple as that, but because obviously if you think of our SEND service at the moment, that's one county-wide. If we split that, how will that work? How will that support children? And I think we're just a long way off from understanding how that would look. But we're very much engaged in those discussions as they move forward. So we will absolutely keep this forum up to date with anything new that we get.
That's great, Sonia. Good luck. Thanks ever so much. Thank you.
Is there anything else on the DSG paper that anybody would like to raise? Otherwise, we can move on, and we'll now turn back to Gemma for your high needs funding update. Thank you, Gemma. So anything else you want to add? Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, thank you, Alison. I'll just recap on what I was going to say, and it's just a verbal update at this stage, because obviously we're in the early stages of the forecasting for the financial year. We do our best to forecast as accurately as we can, as soon as we can. So I've shared with the group, as part of the papers that Teresa sent out, the updated deficit management template. Now, this is what we have to send to the Department for Education on a regular basis. We update it as whenever there's a new version or template that has been issued. I think we're on version 9 or 10 at the moment. So that's the most up-to-date version. It matches the figures that are in Sonia's paper. Mike Quinton works with that alongside my team to get that updated. It does show the overspend is going to continue over the coming years, and we try to model it on the, as I mentioned earlier, on the trajectories around the growth we've seen in recent years, the growth we're seeing in EHCP requests, and split across the different types of need. So that reflects, like I say, what was in Sonia's paper and will be shared with the department. When we look at the early forecasting, to give you a summary, where we expect to see the biggest increases, it's the same as every year. So it's the bespoke packages where we're putting in short-term intervention for children who at the moment can't access the setting, either their mainstream or specialist setting that they are attending. So that could be that they're doing sometime in their school and also sometime an AP setting. So that's alternative provision. So we're expecting to see that grow. We do also put in place some alternative provision if a child is awaiting specialist. If there's a placement that maybe isn't coming through until the September or the next term, then we'll put in some alternative provision, and that's just growing again in line with the number of the volume that's coming through the system. The other increase is on the independent placements. That's a combination of, again, growth, but also increase in costs for those placements. We do have a robust fee increase process. If a provider does request a fee increase, we put them through the process. We ask them to give us a financial breakdown, and there is a panel that agrees those. So we don't just accept fee increases, we do hold those providers to scrutiny, and obviously that's also been through the audit process. So they're quite comfortable with the way that we are doing that at the moment to ensure that we get the best value for money that we possibly can. Difficult with those providers, but at least we do have that audit trail of why that more funding is required. And then the third area where the biggest growth is also the top-up funding. So this is the funding we pay on top of the place funding that the schools receive directly from the Department for Education. So that place funding, that top-up funding is banded. So we have band A to H, which are set amounts, and schools apply for those bands for the children. And then there's band I, which is where we have the more bespoke provision. The band I's are higher than we're seeing requests for those higher than they've ever been. But again, they do come through to a band I panel who approve those and make the decisions and challenge the schools back about how they're spending that money and the progress that the children are making due to that additional costs. The other reason the top-up funding has gone up as well is demand, as I've mentioned before, but also the fact that we're creating more places. So as I mentioned previously, the SEND Capital programme continues, and at the moment we are looking at providing more specialist units attached to mainstream schools, and also satellite provisions of some of the special schools where we can find empty buildings or schools have space for expansion. So this is all part of what was agreed in Cabinet, and will create a number of new places within the local office starting from September 25. So that's why the money's going up. That you know, I will give a more detailed report in October. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the white paper is due in autumn. When in autumn, I don't know. Whether we'll have enough information for us to put it in a paper for next Schools Forum, we may not, because it may not come out till mid-autumn term. But what we will do is I'll do a normal update on where we are with the budgets, and then Michael's put October, hopefully, and I think the meeting's in October, isn't it? So if the papers aren't out in time, we can always talk about it, do another sort of extra verbal update around that if we've had some more information. And hopefully we'll have we can we'll make sure that we've got some other representatives here who can talk in more detail about maybe what that will look like and what the results of the paper, how we will implement that as a local authority.
Gemma, I know that as you've described, you have to send the spreadsheet to the DFE to try to explain how we're managing the budget locally. When was the last time you actually had any feedback as part of the Delivering Better Value programme? Are you still getting, I know there hasn't been, in the past, there hadn't been any useful suggestions from them because they were saying they couldn't identify anything that we ought to be doing that we weren't doing already. I just think it's worth vocalising that again today, that was what they were previously saying to us. When was the last time you actually had any feedback via that programme?
That is a very good question, Alison, because it has been a while. We submit the paper because we've also alongside we've also got a Delivering Better Value project. We were given £1 million to do a project, so that there's been some feedback regarding that, and at the same time when we submit the paperwork for that, we submit our template. But I would need to check with Mike, our assistant director, because he has been checking in with we've got a DFE advisor who Mike's been meeting with. So I'm hoping she's been giving him some feedback. I've not been able to touch base with Mike before this meeting because he urgently got called elsewhere. But if he'd have been here today, he probably would have been giving you. But I don't know if we want to put that as an action in the minutes, and I can speak to Mike about where we are with our DFE advisor.
I think it would just be helpful to know, just if nothing else, that we can again note in as we've done in the minutes before. But I think if we did have something, so at least we could note whether the DFE are continuing to say that they haven't identified any change in practice that we ought to be doing, or if they are suggesting some change in practice, what that is. I think that would just be helpful to note that.
Absolutely, and I'll speak to Mike and ask him to feedback as part of an action from the meeting.
Super, thanks, Gemma. Does anybody else have any points they'd like to raise or any questions for Gemma that haven't been raised? Gordon, thank you.
It's not really a question, it's just a statement and an observation, and it's on a more positive note. I'd just like to say, I mean, the working relationship between the trust regarding the children with special education needs and the counsellor and the council staff, I think is really positive, and we are all sort of working in the same direction. Mainly held back by the lack of funding, but I would like to say it is a positive and working relationship, and I would like to think, and I'm probably sure it's the same with other trusts and the local authority.
Thank you, that's really helpful, Gordon.
Thank you, Gordon.
Okay, any other points anybody would like to make? Magic wand would be good.
Yeah,
magic money tree.
Absolutely.
Anybody can find a magic money tree, then please let us know. Other than that, we'll have to wait for the autumn. Daniel, do come in. Thank you.
Hi there. Sorry, just getting the camera working. Just building on what Gordon's saying there, really, in the SEND space, having been at improvement boards recently and attended the DFE deep dive into leadership and governance, there is a sense that strategically things are really aligning and governance is in a position to really move forwards as well. So just wanted to add that as well.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Councillor Richards.
Right, could I ask Gemma about the home to school deficit? Is that improving? Because we did do this one school, one operator system, and I thought that was actually having a good impact.
I'm hoping Sonia's put her hand up to answer this, because I'm afraid that's not within my remit, but hopefully Sonia will come in on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so home to school transport for SEND, that isn't funded through DSG, so that is a core budget that's not DSG funded. We did have an underspend last year based on what our trajectory was of demand. The feeling is there was a bit of a lag in the system. I would have to go back and ask the actual team. I don't know if Julia's got any, if Julia's still on the call, whether she's got anything specific. I don't think the one school, one operating model has gone any further, has been spread out further. But I think that there was definitely some work done on some route realignment, and I think that was quite a big one of the contracts, because the contracts in home to school tend to be retendered every 3 to 5 years. So every 3 to 5 years you can get quite a big decrease or sometimes increases in the cost of that, depending on which pupils are going to that particular school and the routes they need to take, etc. So I think we did have a significant underspend of about £1 million last year, but it's core funding. It doesn't really support this area. Our concern and our risk is that as our EHCP demand is increasing, and we're doing our best to or the service are sort of trying to increase the numbers that are going through and the speed of which these children getting placed, that could cause a bulge in the system with additional children needing to be transported, which could have a more negative impact on our spending this year. At the moment, that we're not having those suggestions. We're assuming that what our trajectory has assumed in terms of demand and inflation will match. It's really difficult in July. We tend to have to wait till they've got all the sort of placement information from transport in about October, is when they'll have a better decision. But I think what we'll do, Councillor Richards, is I'll speak to with Julia. I'll get the PTU, the Passenger Transport Unit, to do a summary of where we think we're at and send it on to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other points or questions on the high needs funding? No, super. Thank you very much, Gemma, to you and your team.
Thank you, Alison.
Stick with it. Stick with it. We're here for you.
We will. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. There isn't any other business for me to mention today, so the only other item on the agenda is to look at our forward agenda. And as has been mentioned at our October meeting, we will look at the early years final outturn, the SEND provision update and the DSG outturn. And it will also be the meeting at which we'll approve the Central School Services block budget for 26-27. So we won't meet again now until October. So it's my opportunity to wish you all a very pleasant and happy time over the summer, when any of you get to take a well-earned break. So thank you all very much for attending the meeting today, and see you again in October. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.